In the spiraling arms of the Andromeda sector, where 3 binary star systems cast their light across the crystalline megastructure known as the Nexus Institute of Advanced Sciences, a crisis was brewing that would challenge everything the galaxy's greatest minds thought they knew about engineering and innovation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Institute floated in the gravitational sweet spot between the 3 star systems, its biometallic hull constantly adapting to the shifting radiation patterns. Inside its vast corridors, beings from across the known universe pursued knowledge that pushed the boundaries of physics, chemistry, and dimensional mechanics. The Institute prided itself on being the pinnacle of intellectual achievement, where only the most brilliant minds from the most advanced civilizations were granted admission. Marcus Chun had never intended to be here. The 19-year-old from Portland, Oregon, adjusted his worn baseball cap as he walked through the Institute's main concourse, his beat-up backpack looking distinctly out of place among the hovering data pods and bioluminescent storage devices carried by his fellow students. The backpack, held together with strips of silver duct tape, had been with him since high school. His roommate back on Earth had laughed when Marcus refused to buy proper luggage for his journey to the stars. "Classic Marcus," Jake had said, watching him reinforce a torn seam with another layer of tape. "Going to the most advanced institute in the galaxy with a backpack that looks like it survived a tornado." Marcus hadn't told Jake that the backpack actually had survived several minor disasters, including a chemistry lab explosion in his junior year and a camping trip where it had been dragged behind a canoe for 3 miles. Each repair had been another application of duct tape, creating a patchwork of silver that his little sister Emma had dubbed battle armor for school supplies. The memory of Emma's goodbye hug tightened something in his chest as he navigated around a group of Zephyrian students, their gossamer wings creating small whirlwinds as they discussed quantum entanglement, theory and harmonic frequencies that made his teeth ache. Earth felt impossibly far away, though the journey had taken only 6 standard galactic months through the Institute scholarship program. That the scholarship itself had been a fluke. Marcus had submitted what he thought was a routine engineering portfolio to his state university, not realizing that his advisor, Dr. Patricia Wong, had forwarded it to an intergalactic screening committee. His project on adaptive infrastructure using common materials had somehow caught the attention of the Nexus Institute's human cultural liaison, leading to a series of interviews that Marcus still didn't fully understand. "We're looking for unconventional thinking," the holographic interviewer had explained, their form shifting between different species as the translation matrix struggled with their complex communication method. "The Institute has reached a plateau in certain areas of practical problem solving. Perhaps a different perspective might prove valuable." Now 3 months into his studies, Marcus understood what they meant. The Institute's approach to every challenge involved increasingly sophisticated technology, complex algorithms, and exotic materials that required specialized manufacturing processes. When a problem arose, the standard response was to develop more advanced tools, more precise instruments, more elegant theoretical frameworks. That it was undeniably impressive. Marcus had watched his advanced structural engineering professor, a crystalline being called Professor Kyrith, demonstrate how to repair a hull breach using nano-assemblers that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. The process was beautiful to observe, like watching reality itself being rewritten with surgical precision. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that sometimes the elegant solution was also the most fragile one. His dormitory was located in Sector 7, a section of the Institute designed to accommodate carbon-based life forms that required oxygen-nitrogen atmospheres. The corridors here hummed with environmental processors that maintained precise atmospheric conditions, temperature controls that adjusted to individual preferences, and lighting systems that simulated various planetary day cycles. Marcus's room was spartanly furnished by Institute standards, but felt luxurious compared to his dorm back at Portland State. A bed that adjusted its molecular density based on his sleep patterns. A desk that could project holographic interfaces for any conceivable academic task. And a wall-mounted fabricator capable of producing basic necessities from raw atomic matter. He rarely used most of these features. Instead, he'd rigged up his own solutions using materials from the Institute's general supplies and items he'd brought. From Earth, his desk lamp was a regular LED flashlight duct taped to a flexible metal tube he'd salvaged from a broken atmospheric recycler. His phone charger was connected to the room's power grid through an adapter he'd built using spare electronic components and more duct tape. The fabricator remained largely untouched, while a corner of his room had become a small workshop filled with mechanical parts, tools, and yes, several rolls of duct tape that he'd managed to acquire through the Institute's cultural exchange program. His roommate, a gaseous entity named Flux from the Meridian Collective, had initially been baffled by these modifications. Your species possesses technology capable of matter manipulation at the quantum level, Flux had observed during their first week together, their forms swirling around Marcus's improvised desk setup. Yet you choose to bind objects together using adhesive fabric strips. Duct tape, Marcus had corrected. And yeah, it works. But why not use the molecular bonders? They create permanent structural connections that are stronger than the original materials. Marcus had considered this while applying another strip of tape to secure a loose wire. Because sometimes you need to take things apart again. Sometimes the first solution isn't the final solution. Sometimes you just need something that works right now with what you've got. Flux had pulsed with colors that Marcus was learning to recognize as confusion mixed with curiosity. Over the following weeks, their conversations had evolved into an ongoing philosophical discussion about the nature of problem solving. Though Marcus suspected Flux still thought his methods were charmingly primitive, the Institute's daily routine was structured around what they called optimization cycles, periods of intense study alternating with research periods and collaborative problem-solving sessions. Marcus had initially struggled to keep up with the pace, not because the concepts were beyond him, but because the teaching methods assumed a level of technological integration that felt overwhelming. Everything was connected to everything else. Students were expected to interface directly with the Institute's quantum learning networks, downloading information at rates that made human reading speeds seem glacial. Assignments were completed through neural links that allowed for direct mind-to-machine communication. Even casual conversations often involved accessing shared databases in real time to verify facts or explore tangential concepts. Marcus had learned to work around these systems rather than through them. He took notes by hand in physical notebooks, something that drew stares from other students but helped him process information at his own pace. He used the quantum networks for research but preferred to work through problems using pencil and paper, building understanding step by step rather than accepting pre-computed solutions. This approach had earned him a reputation as something of an academic oddity, not struggling exactly, but operating outside the established patterns that define success at the Institute. His grades were solid, his projects met requirements, but his methods were consistently flagged as non-standard by the automated assessment systems. The crisis that would change everything began, like many crises, with something small going wrong at exactly the wrong time. The Institute's main power distribution hub, a marvel of engineering that managed energy flow from 3 different star systems while maintaining perfect stability across thousands of research facilities, had developed what the engineering staff described as a minor harmonic disruption in the tertiary buffer network. In practical terms, this meant that every few hours, sections of the Institute would experience brief power fluctuations that lasted anywhere from 30 seconds to several minutes. For most systems, this was merely an inconvenience. The Institute's advanced technology included backup systems and adaptive algorithms that could handle temporary power interruptions without losing functionality. But the Institute was also home to several research projects that couldn't tolerate even momentary power disruptions. The Temporal Mechanics Laboratory maintained experiments that measured time intervals at the quantum level. The Xenobiology department kept specimens from planets with atmospheric conditions so specific that any change in their environmental controls could be fatal. Most critically, the Institute's primary communication array, the system that maintained contact with thousands of research stations across multiple galaxies, required absolute power stability to prevent data corruption across interstellar distances. The engineering team had been working on the problem for 6 standard weeks. Teams of specialists from dozens of different species had analyzed every component of the power distribution system using diagnostic tools that could examine individual atoms. They had replaced components that showed even microscopic signs of wear, recalibrated harmonic dampeners using algorithms developed specifically for this type of disruption, and consulted with experts from across the known galaxy. The disruptions continued. Marcus first became aware of the situation when his improvised desk lamp flickered during a late-night study session. Unlike the Institute's adaptive lighting systems, his simple LED flashlight couldn't compensate for power fluctuations, so he experienced each disruption as a brief moment of darkness followed by the gradual return of light. At first, he barely noticed. Power grids had hiccups, it was normal. But as the disruptions continued night after night, always at slightly different intervals, Marcus found himself unconsciously timing them. His engineering background had taught him to notice patterns, and something about the irregularity of these fluctuations felt familiar. The breakthrough moment came during a theoretical harmonics lecture when Professor Vecchi, a tentacled being whose species communicated through electromagnetic pulses, was explaining resonance cascade failures in large-scale energy networks. As the professor described how small harmonical irregularities could be amplified through complex systems, Marcus found himself thinking about the old furnace in his family's basement back in Portland. That furnace had developed a similar problem. During his senior year of high school, intermittent power disruptions that occurred every few hours with no apparent pattern. The repair technicians had spent weeks analyzing the electrical systems, checking connections, and running diagnostics. Meanwhile, Marcus's father had grown increasingly frustrated with the cold house and mounting repair bills. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus had solved it with a $10 part from the hardware store and 15 minutes of work. The problem hadn't been with the sophisticated electronic control systems that the technicians were analyzing. It had been with a loose connection in a junction box that was hidden behind a false wall. A connection that had been installed decades earlier during a renovation and forgotten about. The connection was just loose enough to create intermittent contact, but not loose enough to fail completely. Every time the furnace cycled through its heating routine, thermal expansion and contraction would slightly change the position of the loose wire, creating an unpredictable pattern of power fluctuations. Marcus had found it by following the simplest possible diagnostic approach, tracing every wire from the furnace to the electrical panel, checking every connection by hand, and tightening anything that felt even slightly loose. Sitting in the lecture hall, watching Professor Vecchi's elegant mathematical models describe harmonic resonance patterns, Marcus found himself wondering if anyone had checked the Institute's equivalent of a loose wire in a forgotten junction box. That night, instead of studying, he spent hours in the Institute's technical database, not looking for sophisticated diagnostic data or harmonic analysis reports, but searching for something much more basic, the construction records of the power distribution system itself. What he found would set in motion events that would challenge everything the galaxy's greatest engineering minds thought they knew about. Solving impossible problems. The Institute's technical archive facility occupied an entire sublevel of the massive structure. Its quantum storage matrices containing blueprints, maintenance records, and construction data from the past 4 centuries. Marcus had never seen anything like it. Data streams flowed through crystalline conduits like luminous rivers, while holographic interfaces allowed researchers to navigate information landscapes that existed in dimensions his eyes couldn't quite process. Dr. Samantha Rodriguez, the Institute's chief archivist and one of only 3 other humans on the faculty, found Marcus there at 040 station time, hunched over a physical printout that looked ancient compared to the surrounding technology. "Marcus Chun," she said, her voice carrying the slight accent of someone from New Mexico. "I heard through the faculty network that you've been pulling construction records for the past 12 hours. That's either dedication or insomnia." Marcus looked up from the papers, his eyes red from strain. "Dr. Rodriguez, I didn't know anyone else was here this early." "Sam," she corrected, settling into the chair across from him. "And I'm always here early. Archive maintenance doesn't wait for convenient hours. What's got you digging through 40-year-old electrical schematics?" Marcus gestured at the scattered documents around him. "The power fluctuations. Everyone's been analyzing the current system, running diagnostics on the active components, but I wanted to see how it was originally built." Sam raised an eyebrow. "That's not typically how Institute problems get solved. Our engineering teams prefer to work with current state analysis rather than historical documentation." "I know," Marcus said, pulling out another sheet covered in technical diagrams. "But back home, some of the toughest problems I've dealt with were caused by things that happened years ago. Modifications that weren't properly documented, temporary fixes that became permanent, shortcuts that seemed smart at the time but created issues down the road." Sam leaned forward, genuinely curious. "And you think the Institute's power system has that kind of historical baggage?" Marcus pointed to a specific section of the blueprint. "Look at this. The original power distribution hub was designed for the Institute's first phase, about a quarter of its current size. But over the years, they've added new sectors, expanded research facilities, upgraded power requirements. Each time, they integrated the new systems with the existing infrastructure. That's standard practice," Sam noted. "The Institute's expansion protocols are considered among the most sophisticated in the galaxy." "Right, but..." Marcus flipped through several more documents. Each expansion was designed by different teams, using technology available at the time. The 3rd expansion team used Corellian harmonic dampeners. The 5th expansion used Zephyrian quantum stabilizers. The 7th expansion introduced bioadaptive resonance controllers. Sam was quiet for a moment, studying the papers. "You're suggesting compatibility issues?" "I'm suggesting that nobody ever went back and looked at how all these different systems interact when they're stressed," Marcus said. "The current diagnostic systems are so sophisticated that they analyze each component perfectly, but they might be missing the fact that the components weren't originally designed to work together." Sam stood up, her expression shifting from casual interest to professional focus. "Marcus, if you're right about this, it would explain why 6 weeks of advanced diagnostics haven't solved the problem. But it would also mean that the engineering team has been approaching this entirely wrong. Which is why I spent all night trying to figure out how to present this without sounding like I'm criticizing the smartest beings in the galaxy," Marcus said with a tired laugh. "You know what?" Sam said, making a decision. "The weekly engineering symposium is this afternoon. Every department head will be there, plus the crisis response team that's been working on the power issue. You should present your findings." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Dr. Rodriguez... Sam. I'm a first-year student. These are department heads and crisis specialists. I can't just walk into a symposium and tell them they've been doing their jobs wrong. You're not telling them they're wrong, Sam said firmly. You're offering a different perspective. And Marcus? That's exactly what the Institute needs right now. The engineering symposium was held in the Institute's central auditorium, a vast space that could accommodate hundreds of beings with wildly different environmental requirements. The air itself was divided into zones, some areas filled with methane for silicon-based life forms, others maintaining precise humidity levels for aquatic species. While atmospheric barriers kept everything properly separated, Marcus stood at the edge of the human-compatible zone, his worn backpack looking even more out of place in this gathering of the galaxy's intellectual elite. Department heads floated, hovered, or moved in ways that defied his understanding of physics. The engineering crisis team occupied a central cluster of specialized environmental pods, their attention focused on holographic displays showing real-time system diagnostics. Professor Kyrith, the crystalline head of structural engineering, was presenting the team's latest findings. Their form resonated with harmonic frequencies that the auditorium's translation system rendered as precise technical language. Our analysis of the tertiary buffer network has revealed harmonic irregularities at frequencies of 47.3 and 94.7 terahertz. Kyrith explained while multidimensional models rotated in the air above the audience. These frequencies correspond to quantum resonance patterns in the primary power matrix, suggesting a cascade effect originating from molecular-level structural variations in the quantum stabilizer array. The proposed solution involved replacing the entire quantum stabilizer system with more advanced components, redesigning the harmonic dampener network using calculations that would require the Institute's primary quantum computer to process, and implementing real-time quantum correction algorithms that would monitor and adjust power flow thousands of times per second. It was, Marcus had to admit, an impressively sophisticated approach. It was also exactly the kind of complex, high-tech solution he was beginning to realize might be missing the point entirely. When Kyrith finished their presentation, the auditorium filled with the harmonic equivalent of discussion as various species shared their perspectives on the proposed solution. Marcus noticed that most of the conversation focused on refinements to the technical approach, suggestions for more advanced materials, more precise calculations, more elegant algorithmic solutions. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the Institute's director of Human Cultural Integration, caught his eye from across the auditorium and made a subtle gesture toward the presentation area. Sam must have talked to her. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he realized what was being suggested. He looked around the auditorium at beings whose species had been mastering advanced technology for thousands of years, before humans had discovered fire. The idea of standing up in front of them with a theory based on looking at old paperwork and thinking about his family's furnace seemed suddenly absurd, but the power fluctuations were still happening. The sophisticated diagnostics weren't finding the problem. And somewhere in the back of his mind, his father's voice was reminding him that sometimes the simplest explanation was the right one. Marcus stood up. The auditorium's attention systems immediately focused on him, translation fields activating, to ensure his words would be understood across dozens of species. He felt hundreds of alien minds turning their attention toward the young human with the duct-taped backpack. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'm Marcus Chun, a first-year engineering student. I'd like to propose an alternative approach to the power fluctuation problem." Professor Kyrith's crystalline form shifted, harmonics indicating polite curiosity mixed with what might have been amusement. "Mr. Chun, we appreciate student involvement in Institute challenges. However, this particular problem has been analyzed by specialists using diagnostic equipment capable of examining individual quantum states. What alternative approach could you possibly suggest?" Marcus walked toward the presentation area, the auditorium systems automatically adjusting the atmospheric composition to maintain his environment as he moved. Well, sir, I spent last night looking at the construction records of the power distribution system. Not the current diagnostics, but the original blueprints and all the expansion records from the past 40 years. A ripple of what the translation system interpreted as mild confusion passed through the audience. Dr. Vexhai, the theoretical harmonics professor, pulsed with electromagnetic patterns that translated as skepticism. Mr. Chun, Vexhai said, the historical construction data is archived for reference purposes, but it has no bearing on current system analysis. Our diagnostic equipment provides real-time, quantum-level data that is infinitely more precise than decades-old documentation. That's exactly what I thought too, Marcus said, pulling out his physical copies of the blueprints. The sight of actual paper documents caused a stir among several species that had moved to purely digital information storage centuries ago. But I noticed something when I compared the original design to all the expansion records. He activated the auditorium's display system, uploading the scanned blueprints he'd prepared. The holographic projectors flickered slightly as they processed the unusual format, then displayed the Institute's power system evolution over time. The Institute started with a power distribution hub designed for a much smaller facility, Marcus continued, his confidence growing as he fell into the familiar rhythm of explaining a technical problem. But each expansion added new technology, different species engineering approaches, different harmonic frequencies, different stabilization methods. Each expansion worked perfectly with the system as it existed at the time. The display showed a time-lapse visualization of the power system's growth, layer upon layer of increasingly sophisticated technology integrated into the original framework. The problem, Marcus said, isn't with any individual component. The current diagnostic systems can analyze each piece perfectly because each piece is working exactly as designed. But nobody's ever looked at whether all these different systems, designed by different species over different decades, might be creating interference patterns when they interact under stress. Professor Kyreth's harmonic output shifted to frequencies that suggested serious consideration rather than dismissal. Mr. Chun, you're proposing that the issue is systemic rather than component-specific. I'm proposing that it might be both, Marcus said. Or neither. I'm proposing that maybe we should check some really basic things before we replace the entire quantum stabilizer array. The auditorium fell silent except for the hum of environmental systems. Marcus realized that he had just suggested, in front of the galaxy's greatest engineering minds, that they should check the equivalent of loose connections and old wiring before implementing a solution that would cost more than most planets' annual budgets. Dr. Harper stood up from her position in the administrative section. Mr. Chun, what exactly are you suggesting? Marcus took a deep breath. I'm suggesting that someone should physically trace the power connections from the original hub to each expansion, looking for things that might not show up in quantum diagnostics. Loose connections, incompatible junction points, temporary fixes. That became permanent. The kind of problems that don't necessarily cause component failure, but create intermittent irregularities under load. The silence stretched longer. Marcus could feel the weight of alien attention, beings whose civilizations had been exploring the cosmos for millennia, all focused on a teenager who wanted to check if something was properly plugged in. Finally, Professor Kyreth's crystalline form resonated with a new pattern. Mr. Chen, what you're suggesting would require manually inspecting thousands of connection points across multiple sectors of the Institute. The man-hours alone would be enormous, and the likelihood of finding anything that our quantum diagnostics missed is statistically negligible. Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. It would take a lot of time, and it probably wouldn't work. But it would be cheap, and if I'm right, it would solve the problem permanently instead of just covering it with more sophisticated technology. Another moment of silence, then Dr. Harper spoke again. Mr. Chun, are you volunteering to conduct this inspection yourself? Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I am." The auditorium erupted in the harmonic equivalent of surprise, discussion, and what Marcus hoped was interest rather than mockery. He stood at the center of it all, holding his printed blueprints, hoping he hadn't just volunteered to embarrass himself in front of the greatest minds in the galaxy. 5 years after the duct tape that saved the Nexus Institute, Marcus Chun stood before the newly constructed Human Engineering Methodology Center, watching as the final biometallic panels sealed themselves into place. The building's design was a striking blend of advanced alien architecture and distinctly human sensibilities, gleaming quantum processors housed within structures that looked suspiciously like they could be repaired with basic tools. The center represented something unprecedented in galactic education, the first institution dedicated to teaching what had become known as adaptive resourcefulness, the human approach to problem-solving that emphasized working with available materials, thinking creatively under constraints, and finding elegant simplicity within complex systems. Dr. Marcus Chun, the title still felt strange after completing his accelerated doctorate in applied practical engineering, carried a worn leather briefcase as he walked through the center's main corridor. Inside the briefcase, alongside cutting-edge holographic displays and quantum communication devices, was a roll of duct tape. Not for nostalgia, but because experience had taught him that the most advanced technology in the galaxy sometimes needed the most basic solutions. The morning's dedication ceremony had drawn representatives from across known space. The Corellian Assembly had sent their finest engineers, eager to understand how human primitive methods had solved problems there quantum computations couldn't touch. The Zephyrian Collective arrived with atmospheric manipulation specialists who had been studying human weather prediction techniques. Apparently, the human ability to forecast weather using cloud patterns and wind direction had applications in navigating cosmic gas currents that their sophisticated meteorological computers had missed. Most surprisingly, the crystalline hegemony had requested a permanent cultural exchange program. Their hive-mind approach to problem-solving had proven incredibly effective at managing large-scale projects, but they discovered that human individual creativity could identify solutions that group consensus often overlooked. "Dr. Chun," said a familiar voice. Marcus turned to see Flux, his former roommate, approaching with their gaseous form now contained within a more sophisticated environmental suit. Over the years, Flux has become one of the leading advocates for human methodology integration within Meridian space. The collective wanted me to extend their formal gratitude for the atmospheric processing breakthrough on Kepler Station. Marcus smiled, remembering the crisis 6 months earlier. Kepler Station's atmospheric processors had been failing due to what appeared to be quantum degradation in their filtration matrices. Teams of specialists had spent weeks developing increasingly complex solutions involving nano-reconstruction and molecular-level repairs. Marcus had solved it by suggesting they clean the filters, a maintenance procedure so basic that it hadn't been considered relevant to quantum-level equipment. The dirty filters had been creating microscopic turbulence that interfered with the quantum fields. A 20-minute cleaning cycle had restored full functionality. "Tell the collective that sharing knowledge works both ways," Marcus replied. "Your people's understanding of energy flow dynamics helped us solve the water distribution problems on Europa Colony. Sometimes the best solution combines meridian physics with human practicality." The dedication ceremony took place in the center's main auditorium, a space designed to accommodate both the Institute's traditional environmental diversity and a new emphasis on hands-on collaboration. Instead of the purely holographic interfaces that dominated most galactic institutions, the auditorium featured physical workbenches alongside quantum computation arrays, hand tools displayed next to molecular manipulators. Professor Kyrith, now Director of Integrated Engineering Studies, took the stage with their crystalline form resonating with frequencies that had become familiar to Marcus over the years, a harmonic pattern that indicated deep satisfaction mixed with ongoing amazement. When a first-year human student suggested that we should check our connections with adhesive strips, Kirith began, their translation carrying subtle harmonics of humor, many of us questioned whether such primitive methods had any place in advanced engineering. Today, we dedicate this center to the principle that true innovation often comes not from more sophisticated technology, but from more thoughtful application of simple principles. The audience, a mix of species that 5 years ago might never have collaborated, responded with their various expressions of agreement. Holographic displays around the auditorium showed real-time updates from dozens of projects where human methodology had been integrated with alien technology. The Titan terraforming project had been accelerated by 18 months when human agricultural techniques were combined with Zephyrian atmospheric manipulation. The Deep Space Communication Network had achieved 34% better efficiency by incorporating human redundancy principles into quantum entanglement arrays. Most remarkably, the Andromeda Peace Accords had been successfully negotiated using a human diplomatic approach called shuttle diplomacy, bringing opposing parties together through informal, practical collaboration rather than formal negotiations. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, now the Institute's Director of Cross-Species Innovation, approached the podium with a slight smile. 5 years ago, a student with a duct-taped backpack challenged our assumptions about problem solving. Today, that same approach has fundamentally changed how the galaxy thinks about engineering, diplomacy, education, and cooperation. She gestured toward a holographic display showing the center's current enrollment. We now have students from 127 different species learning what we call the human methodology, not because humans are superior engineers, but because human constraints force the development of approaches that complement advanced technology beautifully. Marcus watched from the audience as the display showed the center's various programs. The Adaptive Resource Management track taught students how to solve problems using whatever materials were available. The Constraint-Based Innovation program showed how limitations could drive creativity rather than hinder it. The Integration Methodology courses focused on making different technologies work together, even when they weren't originally designed for compatibility. But perhaps most importantly, the center taught what had become known as practical empathy, the human ability to understand problems from the perspective of the user rather than the designer. This approach had revolutionized everything from spacecraft design to interspecies communication protocols. Admiral Sarah Washington, representing Earth's expanded role in the Galactic Council, stood to address the assembly. Her presence alone represented a dramatic shift. 5 years ago, Earth had been a junior member of the galactic community, barely trusted with basic scientific cooperation. Now human innovation centers existed on 47 different worlds, and human advisors were integral to major engineering projects across known space. The Human Engineering Methodology Center represents more than just a new approach to education. Admiral Washington began. It represents a fundamental principle that the Galactic Council has formally adopted, that true advancement comes not from any single species superiority, but from learning how different evolutionary paths can complement each other. She activated a new holographic display showing the Galactic Innovation Index, a measure of technological and social progress across member civilizations. The trend line showed a dramatic acceleration beginning exactly 5 years ago, the point when human methodology began spreading throughout galactic institutions. Human practicality combined with Corellian precision has solved engineering challenges we thought were impossible. Human adaptability merged with crystalline coordination has enabled projects at scales previously unimaginable. Human individual creativity working alongside meridian collective consciousness has opened entirely new fields of research. Marcus felt a familiar mix of pride and humility as he listened. The success wasn't really about human superiority. It was about discovering that different approaches to the same problems could enhance each other in unexpected ways. After the ceremony, Marcus found himself in the center's main workshop, a space that looked like nothing else in Galactic education. Traditional workbenches with hand tools sat alongside quantum fabrication units. Bins of basic mechanical components were organized next to exotic matter storage containers. Students from dozens of species worked side by side, some manipulating matter at the molecular level while others learned to join materials using techniques that humans had been using for centuries. Zara Thompson, one of the center's first graduates, and now a professor of applied integration theory, approached with a group of new students. Her specialty was teaching alien species how to think like human engineers, how to see problems as opportunities for creative solutions rather than obstacles requiring more sophisticated tools. "Dr. Chun," she said, the Vorthan delegation wanted to understand the philosophy behind repair-based thinking. Could you explain why humans prefer to fix things rather than replace them? Marcus looked at the group of students, crystalline beings whose species typically dissolved damaged items and regrew them from stored molecular patterns, gaseous entities who could simply redistribute their mass to work around problems, and silicon-based life forms who upgraded their components as easily as humans changed clothes. On Earth, Marcus began, settling onto a workbench, resources were always limited. When something broke, we couldn't just fabricate a replacement from raw matter. We had to figure out how to make it work with what we had. That constraint taught us to really understand how things worked, not just how to use them. He pulled out his roll of duct tape, now a teaching tool rather than just a repair material. But more than that, fixing things taught us that most problems have multiple solutions. The perfect solution might be to replace a component with something better. But the practical solution might be to repair it in a way that actually makes it more resilient than the original design. One of the Vorthan students, their crystalline form resonating with curiosity, asked, "But why not simply improve the design to eliminate the possibility of failure?" "Because," Marcus replied, applying a strip of tape to join two pieces of metal. "In a demonstration, failure teaches you things about the system that perfect performance never could. Every time something breaks and you fix it, you understand the system better. Every constraint forces you to think more creatively. Every limitation becomes an opportunity to discover something new." The workshop hummed with activity as students from across the galaxy learned to approach problems with hands-on experimentation rather than purely theoretical analysis. The results had been remarkable, hybrid solutions that combined the precision of advanced technology with the resilience and adaptability of human engineering principles. As the day wound down, Marcus walked through the center's memorial corridor, where displays honored the breakthroughs that had emerged from human methodology integration. The Proxima Station rescue, where creative problem-solving had saved 50,000 lives when sophisticated systems failed. The Kepler ring construction, completed ahead of schedule using human project management techniques combined with alien engineering capabilities. The Treaty of Titan, where practical cooperation had resolved a conflict that diplomatic protocols couldn't touch. At the end of the corridor was a simple display case containing the original duct tape from Marcus's backpack. The same tape that had held his belongings together during his journey to the stars and eventually helped solve the Institute's power crisis. The placard read, "Sometimes the most advanced solution is the simplest one that works." Outside the center's main windows, the three binary stars of the Nexus system were setting, their light painting the biometallic structures in familiar shades of gold and purple. But now, scattered throughout those structures, Marcus could see the subtle signs of human influence, reinforced joints that could be repaired rather than replaced, modular systems designed for adaptation rather than perfection, and spaces where beings from different worlds could work together using tools they all understood. The galaxy had learned something fundamental from a student with a duct-taped backpack. That innovation wasn't about having the most advanced technology, but about having the wisdom to use the right solution for each problem. Sometimes that solution was a quantum computer capable of processing reality itself. Sometimes it was a strip of adhesive fabric and the creativity to see possibilities where others saw only limitations. Marcus Chun adjusted his worn baseball cap and smiled. Tomorrow, a new group of students would arrive at the center, ready to learn that the future of galactic civilization might just depend on remembering that the best solutions often came not from thinking beyond available resources, but from thinking more creatively about how to use them. The stars continued their eternal dance, and across the galaxy, beings who had never imagined working with primitive materials were discovering that sometimes the most sophisticated approach was knowing when simplicity was exactly what the situation required. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.